Okay, Barbara. So on the co-facilitator subject, I'm curious what it's like to work with co-facilitators, and what are your thoughts on being an established facilitator and bringing in an emerging facilitator?
Yes, I've had a lot of experience co-facilitating, and I would say to both new emerging facilitators and established facilitators that this is probably one of the best things, the things I'm most proud of in my career is the way I've been able to figure out how to co-facilitate. And I learned this a little bit from my good colleague, Nancy Luna Jimenez, and that need to have support. On the one hand, you might think that the experienced facilitator is doing all of the work, but the emerging facilitator is a tremendous support to you if you are an experienced facilitator who's getting the gigs. And you think, well, I do this by myself. I can't be bothered, can't be bothered to mentor someone. And what if they screw up and my client fires me and I don't have this client anymore? And I would just say, just stop thinking like that. We cannot think like that anymore. You have to do this work of bringing in new leaders into this field of facilitation. The baby boomers are all about to fly off the coop, and we need to not exit quite yet. We're good at getting jobs. Bring in these younger facilitators, and this is how you'll benefit. Number one, you'll have somebody who's very passionate and eager to learn from you. You will be able to talk about anything that's stressing you with that person ahead of time. You can say, these are the places that I really, I'm terrible at setting up space, for example. Now, if I have another physical body to help me set up the space so that I can be poised and calm when I start out, so that the room looks beautiful, that's a huge assistance to me. And clearly, anyone can do that. It's not necessarily, the piece that the emerging facilitator wants to do, but that's a piece that can be incredibly helpful. The other thing, you can ask your emerging co-facilitator, what do you love to do? What are you really good at? Well, I'm really good at team building games, or I'm really good at very deep conversations, or I'm really good at giving instructions for an activity, and just have them start where they feel confident and good, and practice together if you need to. And I know that takes a little extra time, but what happens at the end of the day when you facilitated with somebody that's been helpful to you is you leave not exhausted, you leave exhilarated, and you leave, wow, the client got a much better job. They had two voices in the room. They had two potential generations in the room. That's extremely good modeling. And I got to actually rest and do what I'm really good at. And I got this other person to do what they're really good at. And at the end of the day, you can say, okay, so now let's think about the next gig, the next job, and where would you like to grow? And you just have to step back and let them grow. And you have to tell your client, I'm cultivating new leadership in this field. And we're going to, we've been working together for a little while. You don't have to say for how long. Maybe you've only done half a day together. But you just let your client know that that this is really important, and that's part of your mandate. And clients are very, very accepting. They'll often allow the budget to grow a little bit as a result. And if the budget doesn't grow, you can negotiate and you think, okay, well, how much less stress am I having as a result of having this kind of support with me? Someone to talk through things, somebody to help me set up, someone to help me take down. Maybe that's all you do initially. And then the next thing is that somebody who can do those activities that I hate doing. And then the next thing is I can have somebody who can, we can bounce back and forth and truly co-facilitate something that's fairly complex. You look after that while I look after this. So you watch this group while I watch that group. And it allows you to do so much more. And so my best advice is, stop doing this alone. It's just not worth it. It's so much better not alone. And if you don't know who to co-facilitate with, Malia's got this whole list of people who want to work with you. right?
You really do. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I'll just say, like, in 1 month, I got 100 subscribers. Like, people want this. They need this,
Aw.
you know?
Yeah. And it's great for me because I have a lot of people come and say, how do you do this? And now I can just go, oh well, you can just go talk to Lily. So thank you. I can now rest. I can finally rest. I know you're going to ask me a couple of other questions. Let's cover those and then we'll say goodbye. And this has been just so amazing to talk with you.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so moving on to other questions about your experience with professional facilitation. This was kind of a big picture one, which is what has your facilitation career looked like? Do you want to go into that one?
I'm sure. Yeah, I can do that. Let me just take a pause. So Malia, you just asked me about what's my facilitation career look like, and as you said, it's different for everyone. Mm-hmm. When I started out, facilitation wasn't that popular, and I was one of the few that I knew that had facilitation as a full-time entrepreneurship. And I decided to be an entrepreneur as opposed to an in-house facilitator because I had been an in-house consultant / facilitator, and I had found it very difficult from a number of points of view. It hadn't given me flexibility as a mother of young children. It hadn't given me recognition and acknowledgement, both in terms of pay and emotional acknowledgement, as a woman in the 90s doing something that mostly men were doing. And so when I started my own business, I was very much about, I want to be in charge. And so that was kind of interesting. I want to be in charge. I want to know who I'm working with. I want to decide whether I get to work with them in a consulting firm. I hadn't had that decision making ability. And I'd worked with some really great clients, but I'd also worked with some very tough clients. And I had things like sexual predation on me. I mean, it was very, very stressful, the work I was doing. And I didn't want to be doing that, having those circumstances arise for me again. And it's not that entrepreneurship is easy. Entrepreneurship requires a certain mindset. It requires you working fairly hard to make a lot of connections at the beginning. The fact that I adopted technology very early was in my favor. And interestingly enough, at the end of my career now, I'm getting a lot more leads without actually generating them myself, simply because of my presence. I loved being creative. I loved doing YouTube videos, and I loved doing blogs. And that has created a fairly powerful social media presence. And now jobs are coming to me from a lot of places and people that I don't know at all. They weren't wow. Direct. And so that's quite interesting to me. Finally, after 10 or 15 years of being fairly present in social media, how it's starting to coming up in the search engines pretty powerfully now. And so I would say, do create a social media presence in a way that's comfortable for you. And so that my career has been as an entrepreneur, and as I mentioned in part A of our interview, that I started out having several portfolios, so to speak. I had the motivational speaking, I had the facilitation, and then I had the training. And the training, I branched out into work-life balance, stress management, time management. But ultimately, at some point, I made a decision, no, I want to be everything facilitation. And that at that point of becoming more precise and clear about, this is what I love to do. Because as you said at the beginning, it's about creating that system syncing. It's about creating those collaborative relationships. It's about connecting people and ideas. And that's the piece where I really wanted to have the impact in my life. And so then I said, okay, I'm going to help. I'm going to mentor facilitators. I'm going to facilitate. I'm going to train potential facilitators. And that's all I'm going to do. And so that was a very good decision for me. And the other thing that has been helpful, it's not for everyone, but a lot of people come into facilitation by being coaches, like life coaches or business coaches. And you have to realize that one-on-one coaching or even group coaching is still very different from facilitation, and you have to be much less directive. It's much less hierarchical. It's the least hierarchical of all the mentoring, speaking being most hierarchical, then mentoring, and then, consulting, mentoring, and training are all hierarchical, but facilitation is not. And you have to understand that paradigm difference. If you don't get that shift, you cannot be a good facilitator. And so that's the piece that I've been really trying to impress upon people who are coming into the field, because I also certify with a couple of agencies, and the thing that we find most is people don't understand that hierarchical stance. And if you want to be a process facilitator, you have to understand it's about letting the group do the work. You do not have to be directive in any way. You have to be clear in your processes. You have to choose the right design. And then, so I'm getting into best practices again, back to your other question. But I'll just say that started in 1995, and so it's 27 years later, and I have to say that it's been a progression, and bigger jobs have come along, and I have had to decide, how many big jobs do I want to take? So that was kind of a big milestone as well, when I started getting really like summits, 100-person summits or 300-person summits, and that was as a whole nother skill as well. And you have to decide for yourself, is that something you'd like to do? They're beautiful because you get to co-facilitate with a number of people, and you get to have a really big impact, but they require a huge amount of skill in terms of designing. And so I just kept taking, I had to pay attention to what the universe brought to me. And when I was ready for something, I would often say, I want this. I would say it to myself, and literally the next day I'd get a call. We're looking for a facilitator to do a 350-person summit. And I go, oh my God, the power of thinking, right?
Yeah, I love that. And it's so helpful to hear some of your challenges with in-house facilitation and how that inspired you to do entrepreneurial freelance facilitation, because I actually haven't heard people talk about those challenges before, but it's so insightful. So that's really great. And you already mentioned a little bit about this, but some of the question we had was, what were the biggest challenges you faced in establishing your facilitation career, and how did you overcome them?
Right, yeah. I think the thing that has helped me all along, and I've been thinking about it a lot lately too, because I feel like I'm entering a new phase of my career, and it's called sort of the philanthropic part of my career, is really just have a lot of time for reflection. And I have learned the art of reflection from the Institute of Cultural Affairs, and the focused conversation method, and I use that, the ORID, which I have a lot of blogs on if people are interested in Institute of Cultural Affairs. There's all over the world. Just look them up. Their training is TOP, Technology of Participation. Many of you heard me speak about it, but that art of reflection is really critical as you're going through challenges in your career. To step back and go, okay, what caused that? Or maybe it's a loss of confidence because the job didn't go the way you wanted it to. Or maybe you're not getting the jobs, the number of jobs you want, the amount of money you want, the kinds of jobs you want. And so you lose your confidence. You have to reflect, okay, so when did I have success? And not to forget that success, and not to overly focus on the places where you've lost confidence or things didn't go the way you wanted. More and more you'll trust your instincts. And so I've really had to hone in on trusting my intuition and doing a lot of reflection. And I use all of the facilitation tools on myself. Like, use them, they're there, they help you. And I wrote a chapter in a book, it's called The Power of Facilitation. And it was a group of us from all over the world. We loved writing that book, and the chapter that I was asked to write by my good friend, Kimberly Bain, is just, how do you use the tools to self-facilitate? And so, do a timeline on your life and discover what you're good at. Do a timeline on your clients. Do a timeline on the traumas that you face. Do a timeline on, places that you have really felt good. And then just focus on that. And so I would say the cautions are get a lot of support, get a counselor if you need, work with colleagues that you love to work with, and cultivate them. You meet these incredible colleagues often by attending IAF conferences or meetups or, Zoom. We used to have these mastermind groups, and that is essential to have those connections throughout your career. Don't go, it's the same message, don't do this alone, which is why I love what you're doing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's all really great. And it actually kind of connects to the other question that I was going to ask, which is like, what recommendations do you have around overcoming challenges, and what resources do you have to share that would help people with that facilitation, building their facilitation career?
And I just have to point out that Malia is a great facilitator, because she's just like able to segue my what I said, and she's paying attention, and she goes, okay, I know how to like get you to go to the next thought. As I've been sort of rambling along. Resources that I've loved, of course, is the International Association of Facilitators. I mentioned the Institute of Cultural Affairs with their technology participation. There's great, I love taking courses on how to use technology, participatory technology, like, Miro collaborative whiteboard, and, Zoom lessons. And I'm always joining different classes. There's a new class on leadership development that is using different platforms and tools. And I think, yeah, this would be great, because I want to help develop new leaders. And so, yeah, why don't I take this online class? And every time you take an online class, you learn something new. And so my colleagues are so good at merging Zoom with Google Slides and different whiteboard platforms, and, Hangouts, and yeah, I don't even, you mentioned a couple of groups that I hadn't even heard of. Maybe you can say them again. There was obviously LinkedIn, but there was something else that you'd mentioned that I hadn't heard of.
Or for finding jobs, or for different facilitation communities.
Yeah, at this point, different facilitation communities.
Yeah, have you heard of the Art of Hosting?
Yes, I have. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, totally. So that's a great one. And what I think's really cool about that one, because I really believe in, like, I'm impartial to the approach, but partial to the principles, because there's so many different facilitation approaches out there. And the Art of Hosting is kind of like that. Like, they have like Theory U, Open Space Technology, World Cafe, and they try and interweave that together to support the art of hosting spaces and facilitating many disciplines. And so yeah,
that's great. That's great. And I have loved having, this would be one other sort of resource or recommendation I have, is I've loved having kind of one solid platform, and that's been my technology of participation. And on that I have, popped over, mind mapping, and Facilitator Cafe, and as you say, appreciative inquiry, and yeah, I mean, so it's been great, because I can go and, okay, here's another idea or approach or tool or methodology. How does that fit with what I know already? And then no matter how many different methodologies you've learned, if you've got one basic one, you have that coherency when you insert another one on top of your base knowledge. So get really good in a base knowledge, and then every time you add a new thing, ask yourself, how do those two interrelate? How do they complement each other? How do they not complement each other? Really understand how to make them even more powerful together than as two incoherent things. And I think that's really key if you want to be using more than one methodology.
I think that's a great recommendation, because I know for me and I think the younger generations of facilitators, it's so overwhelming how many trainings there are and certificates there are, and like what's the best thing to choose. And that's why I love TOP and IAF, is because they've been there since the beginning, you know, like they've really curated facilitation as like a philosophy over decades. So I think
yeah, there's some great new ones coming up. The Circle Way, one of my colleagues ran a Zimzadeh Tehrani. She just added a new name, so that's why I was hesitating. But she's working with the Circle Way, and it's very much about creating deep relationship building and connections. And I think it's very good to pay attention to that, especially when we're doing cross-cultural work, cross-generational work, cross-sector work, to help people understand where their systems and their approaches and perspectives overlap, as opposed to how they fight with each other, because they don't have to fight with each other. They can actually come together into this beautiful weaving if we know how to help people see that.
I love that you brought up the Circle Way, because that's definitely such a transformative modality that I see in the facilitation ecosystem.
Yes, it's an ecosystem, and it's so delightful for me after 2.5 decades plus to see its evolution, and to see how all generations are embracing it, all sectors are embracing it. We're seeing it just arise everywhere. Then people's understanding for the need to have someone from the outside who's not embedded in their content just come and literally create a pathway for them. And it's can be so powerful. I mean, as a client, I would say, we can't possibly spend that much money on like a one-day event. Well, if that one-day event is going to just skyrocket your organization, community, or team into something completely different, that's so worth it, and it takes a huge amount of effort and time for the facilitator team to put that together for you, and to honor their time, and knowing that, they might only get 1 or 2 gigs a month, and they're trying to subsist on that. At the beginning, after that, then I'd never recommend more than 5 to 7 gigs per month. That's kind of my mentor, Bill Staples, used to say, no more than 10 gigs. And I said, 10 gigs, that's way too much. Your mind is like vibrating on all the different levels, but you can only handle so much. Your mind can only handle so much at a time, because each one takes you days to prepare, even if it's only a 2-hour event. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Charge your preparation time. That's another recommendation.
Yeah, that is a good recommendation.
We should probably end here. Was there any last thing that you'd like to say or ask?
Just that I want to share. I hope that new people from my network find these videos, and what I want to say to them is just that, like, go to Barbara's website, North Star Facilitators. I mean, really, like, you are a thought leader in the facilitation world. I see you as like one of the top experts that's seen, the journey of facilitation. And I feel really honored and so grateful to share space with you. And so thank you for, thank you for doing this with me.
Oh, thank you, Malia. I'm so excited to see your company unfold, and we'll stay in touch. And for now, we'll just say adieu. In Portuguese, we would say
ciao.
Ciao. Ciao.